45 days after 9/11, the United States government passed the Patriot Act, a chilling law that used the guise of national security to greatly expand the federal government's secret surveillance powers. The Patriot Act trampled on the Constitution and allowed law enforcement to access personal information such as phone records, emails, and financial transactions without establishing probable cause or obtaining a warrant. The act broadened the definition of domestic terrorism, which led to concerns that it could be used to target political activists, protesters, and others exercising their right to free speech. It expanded the use of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which operates in secret, raising concerns about the lack of transparency and potential infringement of individuals' civil liberties. Amongst other things, the act also permitted the indefinite detention of non-citizens without charge and allowed for the use of secret evidence in court proceedings, raising concerns about the violation of due process rights. But it seems the nation hasn't learned its lesson. Almost 23 years later, another far-reaching bill, the Restricting the Emergence of Security Threats That Risk Information and Communications Technology Act, better known by its acronym, the Restrict Act, is using the same national security talking point to justify further federal government encroachment on Americans' rights. Although the bill doesn't mention TikTok, its authors, Democratic Senator Mark Warner and Republican Senator John Thune, have framed it as the best way to counter the TikTok threat. TikTok, being owned by Chinese company ByteDance, with considerable ties to the Chinese Communist Party, gives China the ability to more easily surveil and influence U.S. citizens. Both Democrats and Republicans are in favor of curbing China's control. However, the impact of the bill extends far beyond TikTok and gives the U.S. government sweeping powers to ban a wide range of apps and services. The bill authorizes the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit current, past, or potential future transactions involving technology products or services with more than 1 million U.S.-based annual active users that 1. Are deemed to pose an undue or unacceptable risk in various areas, such as national security and election interference, and 2. Involve anyone determined to be owned, directed, or controlled by a foreign adversary, a term that can currently be applied to China, Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela, but can be extended to other nations by the Secretary. The Secretary of Commerce can also refer these tech products and services to the President, who can take action to, quote, compel divestment of or otherwise mitigate the risk associated with them. Caitlin Vogus, the Deputy Director of Rights Group, the Center for Democracy and Technology's Free Expression Project, warned that these powers target the free speech rights of Americans. In a statement to Motherboard, she said,
"The Restrict Act could lead to apps and other ICT services with connections to certain foreign countries being banned in the United States. Any bill that would allow the U.S. government to ban an online service that facilitates Americans' speech raises serious First Amendment concerns."
Rights groups have also sounded the alarm about the Restrict Act's threats to fine or imprison those who attempt to circumvent the restrictions the bill puts in place, a threat that they fear could be aimed at U.S. citizens who attempt to access banned apps or services. The Restrict Act states, quote, "No person may engage in any transaction or take any other action with intent to evade the provisions of this act." The bill even makes it unlawful to approve of, quote, "any act that tries to evade the provisions of the bill." Citizens that violate these rules can be fined up to $1 million and imprisoned for up to 20 years. As with almost all overreaching bills, Senator Warner has promised that these penalties won't be used to target individual users. However, digital rights group, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, has noted that the bill doesn't actually prevent individual users from being targeted. In an article about the Restrict Act, the EFF warned,
"Due to undefined mitigation measures coupled with a vague enforcement provision, the bill could also criminalize common practices like using a VPN or sideloading to install a prohibited app."
Another concerning aspect of the Restrict Act is that it allows the Secretary of Commerce to form technical advisory committees without them being subject to Chapter 10 of Part 1 of Title 5 of the United States Code. This section of the law aims to reduce, quote, "the undue influence of special interests and lobbyists." It allows Congress to review the proposed activities of advisory committees before they're formed and ensure that these committees aren't being, quote, "inappropriately influenced by special interests." It also requires advisory committees to report their activities and goals to Congress, make their meetings open to the public, make transcripts available to the public, and file reports with the Library of Congress. Excluding Restrict Act advisory committees from this section of the law opens the door for lobbyists representing U.S. tech giants to serve on these committees, push for their competitors in other countries to be banned, and further cement their dominance. And the problems don't end here. The Restrict Act also limits judicial, congressional, and public scrutiny of the government's actions. Actions taken by the Secretary of the Treasury under this act are exempt from sections 551, 553 to 559, and 701 to 707 of Title V of the United States Code, sections that require federal officials and agencies to provide public notice when proposing rulemaking, allow interested persons to participate in the rulemaking, and give those who suffer legal wrong as a result of government action the right to judicial review. The scope of judicial review under the Restrict Act is limited to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, and the court is prohibited from disturbing, quote, any action taken by the Secretary or the President when they review or prohibit transactions or take action against tech products and services, unless a petitioner demonstrates that the action is unconstitutional or violates a statutory command. Additionally, Americans have, quote, no right of access to the information that the government uses when deciding whether to prohibit transactions involving technology products or services under this bill. The Freedom of Information Act also doesn't apply to any information submitted by affected parties or created by the government when reviewing such transactions. Despite the glaring problems with the bill, its architects are blaming TikTok for the criticism and claiming that the owners of the app are, quote, spreading false claims about the Restrict Act in an effort to continue operating with impunity. According to Senator Warner, the Restrict Act has more than 20 bipartisan co-sponsors. The bill also has the full support of the Biden White House, which has already demonstrated that it's no fan of free speech and is currently being sued for alleged First Amendment violations. If the Restrict Act passes, the Biden administration and any future pro-censorship administrations will be handed new powers to continue their crackdowns on online speech.